Right now, hearing from my moderate Democratic friends that there's a lot of movement to get this thing over with fast.
Hello, and welcome to The Conversation. I'm Dasha Burns, White House Bureau Chief for Politico, and every week on this show, I invite one of the most compelling power players in Washington and beyond in for a chat to talk about how they're navigating and shaping this incredible era of American politics. And my friends, this has been quite a week. It started with a press conference that I attended with President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They announced a 20-point peace plan between Israel and Hamas, should Hamas choose to accept it. It also included a future outlook for Gaza. The question now, will Hamas accept that deal? The president did warn that if they don't, he will give Bibi Netanyahu the green light to do, quote, whatever he needs to do in Gaza. Then Secretary Hassett gathered America's top military brass all together here in Washington, D.C. to listen to him and President Trump talk for quite some time, all about America's military might and then some. And finally, we talked about it for a long time, and it has actually happened. The government has shut down, and its impacts could be widely felt, not just here in Washington, but beyond. From federal workers here to TSA that could potentially be impacted, to national parks, to critical food programs that people rely on. So given the shutdown and its potential economic impacts, given the trade wars that we've been talking about for months now, I wanted to do an episode focused on the economy. Voters keep telling us it is their number one issue, and we have two guests that can dig into it from different perspectives. One from the administration and another from the world of big business. And my first guest has been advising the president on the economy. He is really tasked with explaining the economic impact of the shutdown and dealing with those implications. Here's my interview with Kevin Hassett. Kevin Hassett, thank you so much for joining the conversation at a very, very busy time for you.
Yes, there are a lot of things going on and a lot of things not going on, I suppose.
We can hold both at the same time these days. Let's start with the thing that's not going on, that is going on, which is the shutdown. Look, none of us know how long this is going to last, but I wonder from your perspective and analysis, how long until it starts to have a real impact on the economy?
Right. Well, I think that we think that every week of shutdown, it costs us about 0.1% of GDP. So we lose maybe 0.5% over a month. And the fact is that right now, if you look at the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, the Environmental Protection Agency, about 90% of the workers are furloughed. And so those are folks that, will in the fullness of time get their checks back. Usually people are made whole. Right now, they've got to, pay the rent and whatever out of the money that they have at the bank account. And historically, that's been hard on folks, and it's led to reduced consumption and so on of government workers, and reduce services in downtown DC and so on. So it's a very hard, painful moment for government workers who are furloughed, even though, in the end, they get the money back. And, we're sorry that the Democrats haven't opened up the government. We think that it's obvious that they should, that we should have a clean continuing resolution. And then to the extent that we have policy disputes about, healthcare or whatever else, that we then use the extra 7 weeks that we buy with a continuing resolution to have those collegial discussions. But that's not what's happening right now.
To that point, the White House and Republicans are putting the onus on Democrats here. But at a certain point, we've seen this with shutdowns before, right? Voters will look to the guy sitting behind the Resolute desk, and that guy's probably going to look to you and ask you to help him figure this out. So is there a point at which you would advise a president to try a different approach and for example, negotiate with Democrats specifically on that Obamacare subsidies issue?
Right. The bottom line is that, as you know, that these government shutdowns and continuing resolutions have been around for a long time. That they're there in part because when there's a party that's a minority party that has very little control over what's going on in government, that it's one of the things, along with, say, the debt limit, where they feel like they might have some leverage. And so sometimes you get a sort of game of chicken or a showdown during those times. It's something that's happened over and over and over again.
By both parties, by the way.
By both parties, that's right. And I could just say that I've been in Washington now for almost 40 years, and I don't think I've really ever seen the minority party get very much at all out of this sort of Punch and Judy show that we're going through right now. It just isn't very common for a party that has political control to allow themselves to sort of be held up in a circumstance like this. And I think that right now, hearing from my moderate Democratic friends that there's a lot of movement to get this thing over with fast. The last time this happened with President Trump, there was one that was about 3 days and one that was about 35 days.
So what's your over-under here?
I'm just an economist, and I know that I'm not one of the ones with the president's team that's negotiating every day. But I think that the case for opening the government is so strong. The harms that the government workers are going to face because of the Democrats' intransigence are significant. The economic costs are significant. I think that a lot of cooler heads are going to have to come to the table and make this thing end. And I think it'll be sooner rather than later because, again, the policies aren't really aligned in a way where the Democrats have much advantage. And I think that the American people will recognize that we've already passed a House bill that keeps the government open, that we are going to keep putting a bill to get the government open with no conditions on the Senate floor, probably every day. And the Democrats will keep voting no until they realize that, that they're causing real harm. And as patriots, they should stop.
I mean, one of the things that the Office of Management and Budget has instructed agencies to do is draft plans for not just furloughing workers, but permanent layoffs in the case of a prolonged shutdown. You just talked about, you've been in Washington for 40 years. You worked in and around government. You know the dedication of a lot of these civil servants, and it's already such an uncertain time for federal workers. Are you personally comfortable with the mass firings of civil servants as the admin's response to the shutdown?
Look, I think that everybody 100% wants the Democrats to give us a clean resolution so that the cabinet agencies have the money that they need so that they can run themselves effectively. And if the money is not appropriated, then there are legal steps that have always been there. It's not new, that the cabinet secretaries need to consider when they're deciding what am I going to do with the little bit of money that I've got left? How am I going to keep my agency going?
But those permanent layoffs are a different thing, right?
That a permanent layoff or a temporary layoff, they're on the table. They've always been on the table. In the past, people haven't really considered permanent layoffs. And I think that given that already this year, because President Trump's team wants to make the government more efficient, going back to the work that Elon did with Doge, means that I think that the count of federal workers is already down about 250,000 workers, that there's been a movement towards making government smaller and more efficient. And if this, the Democrats need to understand that this administration is serious about potentially continuing along that path.
So this is an opportunity
if they don't open up the government. If they don't open up the government,
way.
We'd prefer they open the government for sure. We'd prefer that. But if they're going to not open the government, then we're going to continue to use the resources and the tools at our disposal to achieve the president's objectives.
Let's talk a little bit about the economy at large, because you've been the president's economic advisor for almost a decade now, right? You served in the first administration, you're serving in this administration. Things feel a little bit different here. This is clearly a different economy than the first one that you were dealing with. How would you describe the differences, and how is your approach different this time around?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something we think a lot about. I can remember when I first came to the Council of Economic Advisors, I was the chairman there before in 2017, that we did quite a lot of work to look at the president's agenda and then to make the case that we could deliver 3% growth. And it was really quite controversial, as you might recall. The 3% number was viewed as sort of an unscientific overestimate, rosy scenario, and so on, because the previous administration, President Obama, his team had sort of convinced everybody that we had this thing called the new normal. And the new normal was that we're going to grow 1% for the rest of our lives. And it was just the way it is. It was like an accomplished fact that we're in a new normal. There's nothing we could do. We've got slow growth in the U.S. and we got handed the slow growth by the Martians or something. And we come in and we get absolutely attacked, often viciously, for just saying, hey, no, we've got a way to get 3% growth. And in fact, we had chapters of the economic report of the president where we said, well, we'll get 0.5% from this and 0.5% for that. And then up till COVID, we did. And I think that, so thing one is that the sort of analysis of what delivered 3% growth, it was not, back then it was sort of ex ante analysis, but then we got like ex post verification that what we were saying was true. We were right within a tenth or two. The Wall Street
Journal. I'm going to ask you
to
get a little more layman's terms here for
okay,
for folks.
Sure. But you go back and look, the Wall Street Journal.
It's not CNBC here.
If you go back and look, that we said we'd get 3% growth, we did. And we got the numbers right within a tenth or two. And so we're very confident that if we pursue similar policies, that we can not have to go back to a new normal with slow growth, but once again, get 3 or better growth. And I think that one of the things that President Trump charged us with doing during the campaign is coming, not just saying that stuff we did last time we're going to do again, but have new ideas that would drive the growth, say, from 3 even to 4. And that's why we have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security,
a trade war,
and so on. And what are we seeing? Well, we're right now, current quarter estimate for the Atlanta Fed is that GDP growth is about 4%. And so I think that we're highly confident in our previous analysis and excited that the new stuff that we've cooked up is going to take growth to an even higher level.
Yeah, you are doing a lot of new things. The stuff you mentioned, of course, the tariffs, which I want to talk about. One of the major criticisms of the Biden administration was that they sort of underestimated inflation, right? And highlighted rosier economic data. And to a lot of voters that felt tone deaf. They weren't feeling that the economy was doing well for them. And they were hearing the administration say, no, it's great. Do you worry that you're at risk of doing the same when you talk about GDP, but, we'll dig into this, but, wage growth is stagnant, housing is still unaffordable, the jobs data isn't where you'd like it to be?
Well, I think that each one of those is one of those things that, we could dig into. But I think that the bottom line is that income growths are picking up. We've got one metric of how people feel about things is just, how much stuff are they buying right now compared to how much stuff did they buy a year ago? And that's up 6%, which means that people feel like they have more cash in their pockets. Inflation in the latest GDP release, the deflator for GDP was 2.1%, which is about the Fed's target. And I think you're right that the inflation really, really surprised people during the Biden administration and really harmed people too, because people, negotiate. I don't know you, but you probably get a salary in January, and then maybe you get to talk about what your salary is going to be next January. But meanwhile, you just got to respond to the prices that you see at the store, and the prices went up like almost double digits, really. And the thing was that you could go back and look that I was doing interviews at the time, as a private citizen, saying we're going to have runaway inflation, and it was based on really simple math, where if the government prints lots of money, mails a lot of checks to people, it's kind of like the classic helicopter drop, right? If we were to take every bill that you have in your pocket and add a zero, then the price of everything would go up by a multiple of 10. It's just, simple math. And so it was really clear that inflation was going to take off because of the runaway spending and the sort of attack on supply. So it'd be one thing if everybody was, building new factories and making a whole bunch of more stuff. And then maybe you can spend more and you don't make prices go up. But the Biden administration was regulating and doing things to undermine supply while they were spending like drunken sailors. And so, of course, they had inflation. And then we unfortunately had a Fed that was in denial about the inflation for a while. And so the inflation got really out of control. And it's one of the things that's like a fact that the economists talk about, which is inflation is the thing that is about when it gets out of control, the most unpopular economic variable. And the way to think about it is that, unemployment's a terrible, terrible thing to happen to a person. But when we have really high unemployment, it might be 6 or 7% of the population is unemployed. But when you have 10% inflation, it affects everybody. It affects everybody. And so you really could see it.
Inflation's cooled, but talking about wage growth, like that is still lagging. Do you think that you guys might be overstating how much ordinary families are benefiting from this economy, like at this point right now?
I don't think so. And I think, again, income growth has been solid. Real income growth has been solid. Inflation is coming down. And again, the best metric of how ordinary folks are doing is just like retail sales, the stuff they're buying this year compared to a year ago. It's up 6%. The fact is that's not because of anything that's happening with like the AI data farms or, what the billionaire guys are doing. Those retail sales numbers are really the ordinary folks going to Walmart.
Well, and I think different people are impacted differently, right? This morning, my colleague Sam Sutton has a piece out looking at some of the job data for young Americans and Black Americans, which are two of
Mm-hmm.
the constituencies that President Trump brought into the fold. And he got more votes in those groups than anyone expected, right? But unemployment rates for both groups have climbed and their
Mm-hmm.
paychecks have dipped. And many of them supported Trump because of his
Mm-hmm.
economic agenda and are now starting to question that support. What are you going to do about that for those groups in particular?
Right. Well, the policies, don't forget that the big tax bill passed just a couple of months ago. The policies are working in the sense that we've seen capital spending go way, way up. So they're building new factories, creating new jobs. And, the factories are being built, but you can't hire a person until you've got the electric on and the machines in place and so on. And so I think that we're quite optimistic about the job situation,
So
but
when do you
understand that
think
it takes a
those
little bit of time.
policies, yeah, when what's the timeline? Like when do you think those groups that I'm talking about and just average working class Americans are going to feel the benefits of that bill?
Well, I think they're already feeling the benefits of the bill, but I think the employment situation is a little bit muddy right now, and you already
Well,
hit me
what do
with
you
one.
mean?
It's
What do you
not
mean by that?
CNBC, but there are different measures of what's going on in the job market, and the problem is that the measures require our government agencies to survey people, and so when's the last time you got a call from someone you didn't know to say, hey, how are you doing? How's your job doing? Or are you working? Did you get a pay increase? Like no one wants to take those surveys anymore. And so it's a real problem for the data agencies. And one of the things we're seeing is that the surveys that are being filled out, it's actually kind of paradoxical to me, by firms. When we say, hey, how many workers did you hire? They're saying one thing. And then we have another survey that should give you about the same thing, where we call people and we say, do you have a job or not? And people saying they have a job should align with firms saying I hired a person. And it doesn't. It doesn't at all. And the household survey data is really strong right now. And so, for example, in August, firms said that they created 22,000 jobs. Households said that they found 288,000 new jobs. And so when we're talking about the job picture and when it's going to change, it's one of the things that's the murkiest right now. But I think you can't have 4% economic growth and not have a strong job situation. And so I think the household survey is what I think is the best estimate of what's going
Are
on
you
right
happy
now.
with the job situation though right now, particularly for some of those groups where you can see in the polling like the support is
Right.
starting to
There are
erode a
things.
bit?
Recent college graduates are having a harder time finding a job, and so on. There are
Yeah, and
definitely
housing
pockets
and
of
all of
things
that.
that,
Yeah.
and the housing sector is just beginning to pick up because mortgage rates have come down quite a bit because we've done a good job, I think, of attacking inflation. But yeah, there's definitely work to do.
I want to talk about trade a little bit. You have
Mm-hmm.
said that trade wars are winnable and costless. Data shows that consumer prices are rising, though, and like farmers, for example, are probably going to require billions of dollars in subsidies. So, how do you sort of square that?
Well, what's been happening, right, is that President Trump's trade policy, we were all told, sort of like we couldn't have 3% growth. Last time we were told that President Trump's trade policy was going to give us stagflation, low growth with high inflation, that the tariffs are going to be incredibly inflationary. And instead what happened is that we've raised hundreds of billions of dollars in tariff money, and we've got GDP growth that's almost at a record high. It's like two quarters in a row of close to 4% growth. And so people who had that idea about how terrible the tariffs would be for the economy need to rethink their models. But the models that we relied on that said that this would actually be okay, it would be great for the economy, and it would be great for the fiscal situation. Again, like we talked about the lower mortgage rates for sure are related to the fact that we have all this revenue coming in from tariffs. And so people are much more optimistic about government debt markets. Our model for that was really just quite simply that if we have a trade deficit with, say, China forever and ever, which we did year after year after year, then by definition, China has decided that in order to have a stable country, that they need to create a lot of jobs and sell a lot of stuff to Americans. And so that their supply of stuff to us isn't going to really move very much if we put a tariff. And they're just going to cut the price of Chinese goods so that American consumers continue to buy whatever they were buying from China before. And so, again, the way to think about it is if I used to pay $1 for something and then I put a 10-cent tariff on it, then what the Chinese have done is they've cut the price to 90 cents, and I still pay $1 for that thing. And that's about what's been happening. CEA put out a report that the price of imported goods has dropped a lot because these people who have been giving us a big trade surplus for them, deficit for us, year after year after year, are very inelastic suppliers.
So one thing I've been hearing... Oh, sorry. Go ahead on farmers.
I was just going to say for the farmers, there is a really serious. We've been talking a lot about it this week. The president has truthed about it, and we've had a very senior principals meeting on Friday to go over options to help the farm community. The fact is that the people who grow stuff in rows, like soybeans and corn and so on, have seen a dramatic reduction in demand for their goods or their plants because of China. And soybean prices are way down. And we estimate that farmers could be looking at losses in the tens of billions of dollars.
So trade wars aren't exactly costless then.
Excuse me?
So trade wars aren't exactly costless then. I mean, that is a cost, right?
Well, there's costs and benefits for every single policy.
Right.
There's a lot more money coming in tariffs than the money that's required to help farmers in this circumstance. But also, there are massive negotiations ongoing with our trading partners to, induce them to buy more soybeans and so on. And in fact, you're going to see quite a bit of news of like company A or country A or country B announcing a $1 billion buy. And so we've got a massive amount of policy to help the farmers. We have a massive amount of work to help the farmers right now.
So some of the smarter than me economic minds that I've talked to say that we're going to see by Q2 of next year, we are going to see whether the president's trade policies are working or not. And that's going to have a huge political impact for the midterms, right? What are you planning for in terms of the more of the tangibles coming through from these tariffs next year?
Well, I think that it's clear that when you run it through your economic models that when you have a tariff to the extent that it causes a near-term disruption, then that's where you would see the kind of effects that the president's critics expected to see last spring. And so that the general story for economists who study tariffs is that there can be short-run disruptions, but that in the long run, things work out. If the tariff is there, people onshore production and so on. And so the interesting thing is that or really striking thing is that the place where the tariff policy effects should be the worst is the time right now where we have almost 4% growth and low inflation. And so we're very, very optimistic about how this policy is working and what it's going to look like. It'll be even better next year. It should be, because this is the point in time in the models where usually it's the worst. And it's fantastic.
I want to talk about the Fed before I let you go. You've defended President Trump's public pressure on the Federal Reserve. You've also recently said that an independent Fed is critical. How do you square that? Well,
I think the Fed absolutely should be independent, that there's a massive amount of work that, across really hundreds of years of study, that when the central bank is controlled by a political party that's in control of its government, then the central bank tends to do things like create more inflation, and it's really harmful. And so central bank independence is something that indisputably is important. The problem that we've had when we look at the behavior of this central bank is that you can make a pretty strong case, and it's not just me, it's independent academics, that the governors themselves have been acting in a partisan way. And so, for example, they allowed the Biden inflation to get really out of control, even though it was obvious that we're printing money and mailing it to people and it was an inflationary thing. Alan Greenspan would have scolded Congress for doing that. This Fed did not. They, in fact, didn't start tightening to control inflation until after Joe Biden renominated Jay Powell. And then they, cut rates, surprising everybody in markets enormously right before the election in an apparent attempt to help Kamala Harris's election chances. And so I think central bank independence is essential, but central bank independence isn't just about, is the president allowed to talk to Jay Powell, but it's also about the actions of the people
Well, I think
at the
both
Fed.
can be true at once, right? And I do wonder, do you think that this president's pressure on the Fed has been appropriate in this administration?
I think that the president has a policy disagreement with the Fed. He says what he thinks the Fed should be doing, and I think that he's been proven right by the data. And so I think that the Fed wasn't really responding to data the way it should have been. And I worry about the pattern of their actions. Again, everybody expected, the Fed themselves expected before President Trump was elected the first time, that there would be rate hikes coming. 3 or 4, I think, were priced in, but they didn't actually happen until after President Trump was elected. And before he was inaugurated, all of a sudden the Fed starts hiking rates. But they didn't do it, when President Obama was there. And so I think that the partisan pattern of the actions of the Fed over the last few years should be disturbing to any neutral observer. And I think the president's right to call them out on it.
So you've been floated as a top contender for Fed chair. You've historically been more of a tax guy, I think, right? So what made you interested in this job?
I think that people gossip about who's going to get what job, but I can tell you that Secretary Bassett and President Trump are looking at a long list of names and deciding who's best for the job. And if the president were to choose me, then I'd be happy to talk to him about it.
How soon do you expect the president to decide on a Fed chair?
I don't know.
No idea. No idea.
No. It has to be by sometime next year because that's when Jay's term is up.
But if you were to be interested in that role, what do you see as an independent Fed, and how would you approach that job?
I won't talk about how I would approach the job, but I could talk about how I think that anyone should approach the job. And
what does an independent Fed look like?
An independent Fed is very transparent. When it tells you this is what we think the economy is going to look like, they tell you why. They show you their models. They encourage debate about what model's working best right now. They look at their errors and talk about why they made them, and do that in front of the public. So the wisdom of crowds can also affect the wisdom of the Fed. And so I think that the Fed is still kind of this thing that's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, and that is something I think in today's age should change.
All right, Kevin Hassett, thank you so much for digging into all of this with me, and thank you for joining the conversation.
Oh, it's been fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Kevin Hassett for joining the conversation. And in a moment, you are going to hear from Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful himself. You, of course, know him as a judge on Shark Tank. He is also chairman of O'Leary Ventures and a proud free market capitalist. He popped by the conversation to talk about the state of the economy under the Trump administration, things he likes and a couple things he doesn't like. He has very strong feelings about the government taking a stake in Intel, but he's super excited about this Tik-Tok deal that's on the table with China. And he has a whole lot to say about the markets and the future of the economy. Here is my interview with Kevin O'Leary. Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So you have many hats that you're wearing, but you are someone that I think a lot of Americans look to when they have questions about the economy. And I was looking back over some of your interviews before the Trump administration came into the White House, and you had some pretty high hopes for what this president would do for business, big and small, and for the economy at large. How would you grade President Trump's performance on the economy so far?
Well, the way I grade it is the way the world grades it. I look at capital flows, and I don't show up for politicians. I've said that countless times. I
That's
care.
why we like you on the show.
Yeah, I look at policy. You can't make money with a politician. You make money on the policy they create through their administration. And so when you look at fund flows from sovereign wealth, which is a massive amount, the majority of money invested today comes from those funds all around the world, whether it's the Middle East or the Nordic countries or Norway or whatever. More than half of every dollar is invested from them in the United States, S&P 500, or the U.S. economy. That's one metric to look at. So that's confidence in the economy in aggregate of all the policies, including all the tariff wars and all the rest of it. And then you look at the U.S. domestic market itself, hitting all-time new highs when many people say, how's that possible? Why is it hitting new highs? What's the reasoning behind that? And I think we can dissect all these things, but those two measures themselves give this administration high marks on policy. Now, you may not like the way Trump makes sausage. A lot of people don't like it. They have Trump derangement syndrome. I don't care about any of that. I mean, this is a president who doesn't give a damn if there's a camera in the room when he's ripping something to pieces in the Oval Office. It's not the normal way things get done. And it doesn't matter because what comes out of that is the policy.
But we're not there just yet. And in the meantime, I mean, the sausage making, it hasn't been pretty, right? And I think you've probably heard and you've experienced it yourself. You know, a lot of big business owners and small business owners, the uncertainty is really rattling some folks. I think there's a market piece of it, and the market has sort of factored that in. But for the people that need to figure out a supply chain day to day, that need to figure out how to make dolls in the US as the president wants to see, like they need some kind of outlook that is stable and makes some sense, right? The people that come on Shark Tank, right? They're entrepreneurs, they're starting small businesses or trying to grow their businesses. Is this climate conducive to that? Is it better under this administration right now to be a small business owner or to try to grow your business than, say, a few years ago, forgetting COVID?
Everybody wants everything today. Everybody wants everything resolved all the time. I would note after 17 years of Shark Tank, just entrepreneurial endeavors across America, where the majority of jobs are created between companies with 5 to 500 employees, they have withstood everything, including tariff wars. They've gone through periods of 7 to 19% interest rates, a meltdown in real estate. In fact, the best time to start a business, proven by the statistics, is in chaos. Every time the American economy is going through some kind of a correction is a fantastic time to be an entrepreneur and start something. And then you have to figure out how to pivot through it. This is no different. I mean, everybody wants everything. I always say that because it's true, but you don't get what you want. You get what you need. A great Rolling Stones song you can go listen to get your mood back, you know.
See if we can license it for this podcast.
Well, definitely, because it's necessary to go through the sausage making with this administration. But I also think a lot of companies have found solace in something else that's add productivity. One of the reasons the market's at all-time highs, AI. I thought it was hype 2 years ago. Every single one of my companies uses it today, and it's very productive. It helps enhance margins. It reduces costs in every sector of the economy, all 11 sectors. And so, yes, tariffs are a headache. Yes, they increase input costs, but even in home building, people are figuring out ways to do better capital expenditures around softwood lumber or labor or whatever it is, using AI tools to do it because they're getting very inexpensive. Whether you're generating content for consumer goods services or doing anything in financial services like issuing insurance policies, it all has applications. Maybe that's part of what's offsetting the concerns you're detailing about what's going on in tariff wars and small and large businesses alike. I mean, a large business like automotive, they're suffering too with input costs, but slowly but surely these deals are getting worked out.
There seems to be like a lot that this administration is trying to do with tariffs, right? They're trying to get rid of the national debt, trying to use it to buffer the national coffers. They're trying to use it to reshore manufacturing. In some cases, the president's trying to use it politically to make other kinds of deals with different world leaders. But did this administration bite off maybe a bit too much than they could chew with really unprecedented kind of explosive level of tariff and trade war?
Well, you're right. Nobody's ever attempted to do 60 plus deals in 90 days. But my attitude is it is what it is. Deal with it. Don't get deranged, getting caught up in the political nature of what this is, because there's certainly politics involved. Focus on the policy so you can make radical investment decisions at minimal risk. In other words, if you look for the path of least resistance, you want to find big opportunities because of disruption. You want to find something that has completely been dislocated and invest in that because of the policy changes, because they will get resolved.
You've also been a bit critical of the administration in using taxpayer dollars to buy a stake in Intel, right? Is that a good use of taxpayer dollars, and is that something the government should be getting involved with?
No, it's a waste of taxpayer dollars. I don't agree on everything Trump does. I don't agree on the policy coming out of the administration on every policy. I look at each policy and say, does it make sense or not from the perspective of an investor? Intel is a bad investment. It's been where money goes to die for the last 10 years. Why kill more money? It's one of the worst managed companies in the world when it comes to semiconductors. Nobody wants to buy their products. It should be sold for car parts. That's how capitalism works. When companies die, they're not completely wasted. Whatever's left that's worth something, the other successful companies in their sector buy it, which was going on long before I was force-fed those shares as a taxpayer. I don't want Intel to get my money. I don't give them my money as a private citizen. They're a terrible company. Somebody has to tell the truth. I'm just telling you how it is. That dog don't hunt. It should have been taken behind the barn and shot a long time ago.
So, what's your advice to the Trump administration on that?
Don't do it. I would have killed the Chips and Science Act. That was a stupid act. I read it. There wasn't a dime in there for entrepreneurial small businesses. It was just a government handout. And a lot of it, almost more of it than anybody else, went to Intel, the biggest dog in the sector. I would have killed that act and reduced the deficit with it. But look, Trump gets to do what he wants. He's the president. I don't have to agree with everything he does. I'm just telling you what I didn't like about that act. I'm not the only person pointing this out.
There are administration officials that listen to this podcast. I wonder, you talked about how business owners and others might make their way through this trade war and maybe come out the other end better off. But what is your advice to the president right now in terms of what he could maybe change about his approach to trade and tariffs that could make this process better for the American people?
Well, I tell every president this, and I've had the fortune to meet many of them. Their primary mandate is not to pick sectors in the economy. The American economy is the most successful economy on earth and has been for 200 years. We know what we're doing. The less government we have, the better. The number one mandate of a US president, whoever's sitting in that honored seat, is to uphold the American dream. Our number one export is not energy and it's not technology, it's the American dream. We're the only economy on earth where everybody, everywhere, wants to come here and start a business. Everywhere. They risk their lives to do it. You don't see anybody doing that in China or North Korea or anywhere else, frankly. It's here. That's the number one job of any administration. Maintain the American dream. Keep capitalism alive because it works and it provides for everybody, even though it's volatile and it's got lots of problems. Where else would you rather be? And that's what I keep pointing out. If there's bad policy, it eventually gets worked out. One administration changes what the other did. Anything that hurts the American dream or messes with capitalism is bad.
Do you think there's anything that the administration is currently doing that is messing with the dream?
Well, it doesn't matter what I think. It's what the market thinks and what capital thinks. I mean, I'm basically saying, here's another topic. Fed independence. Don't mess with that. It works. People bring their money here because they like the yin and yang between the executive and the Fed.
The president does not love that yin and yang.
Well, the markets do. They like it. And they make the assumption that when you get a seat on the board of the Fed, you have an obligation for their two mandates, full employment and 2% inflation. We are nowhere near 2% inflation. So we shouldn't be cutting rates right now. We should wait until we get a signal on where inflation is going. We don't want to turn into Venezuela, where hyperinflation devalues everything in the country. I'm one voice on this. Okay, there are many, many others. I like Fed independence. The Fed has always always been abused by the administration, regardless of what administration it is. They simply don't care because they're the Fed. It's a perfect power balance. They look out for the country's fiscal policy in the sense that they control interest rates and employment. These are two very important mandates, and they do their very best.
Is this administration playing a dangerous game with the Fed, you think?
They're playing a game with the Fed. I don't think you're going to be able to stack the Fed like you can stack the Supreme Court. It's not going to work that way. I think, Powell, what does he have? 4.5 months left. He's thinking about his legacy. He's not going to kowtow to anybody. He's just going to do what he thinks right for the country. I don't like that inflation number 2.8 staying steady. I don't like it. So look, that's an opinion. It doesn't mean I'm right. It means I have one point of view.
You're caveating your opinion a whole lot here, Kevin.
I get it, but I want to point something out. I simply work with information that I get. All right. It's important that the Fed set interest rates and they do policy on employment, and we should let them do that. And the reason the administration should be comfortable with that is they have been very successful. You can't say that Trump has not been successful when you look at foreign capital flows into this country, job creation in this country, and the index of the S&P 500. There is no way you can say he's not been successful. I say to him, keep it up, but be careful. You can't get everything you want. We've already talked about that. But what he's delivered so far, by the metrics, by the measure, by capital flows, wildly successful.
Who do you think wins or loses, Democrats or Republicans, with this shutdown?
They both lose with a shutdown, both sides, and they both know that. It doesn't help anything. All it does is hurt the American dream because it takes a little bit of confidence out of the story of the American economy and the American system and the American government. Schumer knows that. Trump knows that. Watch how a deal gets done.
The American dream. A lot of people come to this country for that dream and make this country a better place with those dreams, right? I hope I'm one of them. The administration is trying to change some of the visa programs, including the H-1B visa program that a ton of companies use to bring smart people from all over the world here that then end up starting companies. I mean, so many of the major household names in tech have been started by immigrants. What is your perspective on the changes they're trying to make to the H-1B visa program, restricting it, making it more expensive, making it more difficult?
I understand what the administration's doing there. I understand what Howard Lutnick said about it. He doesn't want it being abused by large tech companies that want to reduce labor costs by hiring people with H-1Bs. I get it, but that's a broad stroke. And obviously Amazon and Apple have been singled out on that one. And maybe to the extent they did that, they should stop. I'm okay with that. But what I am worried about is taking that broad paint roller over another aspect of the program that's very important. Startups. They can't afford $100,000 if they can't find an AI engineer. We've hired everyone we possibly can in America. It's a highly, highly specialized talent. If I could get another AI engineer out of Pakistan, India, or a country where they can get approved for their application, I would want to be able to hire them as a startup because it would give me a competitive advantage to compete globally with great talent. I don't think we want to take that away from American companies. So I would adjust this H-1B mandate for only large corporations at some size where they can afford it. My operating companies can afford this. I'm not against it. But I'm telling the administration now, we can't hire all the engineers we need. We do not graduate enough engineers in America. The Chinese are kicking our ass on that too. Design engineers, AI engineers, coders, you name it. They're pumping them out of their institutions a lot faster than we are. I keep going back to China because we are in a competition with them and we need policies that recognize that.
One of the things you said earlier was, you want to, I'll borrow a phrase from David Sachs, let the private sector cook, right? Let business do their thing, let the markets be the answer for some of these issues that we're talking about. I think it's hard to ignore how much the executive branch is taking on power, how many ways this administration is trying to influence, whether it's big business, whether it's law firms, universities. This is not a small government approach with this White House. How do you reconcile your desire for a smaller government and the big government that this administration seems to be building?
I don't really focus on that. Clearly, Trump is using trade policy as a stick specifically on tariffs to change behavior in the markets. A lot of this kind of tactic you find in real estate development, actually. I do that too. You're always looking, where's my leverage? How do I work with the banks? How can I get them to change, their ratio of debt to equity or whatever? It's just a good example is what he's doing to the Swiss. I mean, it's so simple. 39% is not sustainable. And he wants them to move their gold operations, or at least some of them, or at least one smelting facility to the United States. I think I'd listen to that if I were the Swiss. That's a good deal. Doesn't mean they can't own it. It means that they'll do it because it gets them what they want and the tariff lowered to a reciprocal tariff. So that I understand. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's a very CNBC answer, and I and I get that you're on that network a lot, but I do wonder. I mean, I think there is this tension for a lot of folks that don't want to see the government in all of their business. This government is kind of in all of your business.
Well, this government is making moves in policy. So I invest in Canada. I invest in Switzerland. I invest in the UAE. I invest in the US. I invest everywhere. And I have to know what the policy is. I spend more time on the Hill than I ever have in my life. I go sit down with senators, governors of states, trying to figure out what they want. I don't try and swim the wrong direction. Like, if you want to be successful, you've got to get the wind behind your back and understand what the policy is going to be. For example, I would not invest in a wind farm today. You'll never get a permit.
Yeah, the government, this White House is not interested in supporting that
So
sector.
if you know that, why be stupid about it? Why would you risk capital in that? It doesn't work. It can't be built successfully and profitably without government subsidies. And the government just told you, it doesn't matter which member of the government, the policy says, no, Nanette, no permit for you. Got it.
We've seen so many CEOs, tech and otherwise, come to the White House, make that pilgrimage, have their time with the president. Your friends in big business, your CEO pals, like peek behind the curtain. What are the conversations like around, let's just take this administration's policies. Like, are they concerned about the uncertainty with trade? Are they like, okay, let's buckle up and ride this thing? Like, what is the vibe behind the scenes with the business people that you know?
The vibe behind the scenes on tariffs and trade policy specifically, is they're going to end up reciprocal. It's going to be brutal watching this passion play out, but country by country, it's going to end up reciprocal. Most CEOs have come to that conclusion. So what many are doing right now, knowing the midterms are coming up, making the assumption that most of these deals will be penned before the end of the year, is they're eating the tariffs. They're not passing on the costs yet.
Are they happy to be eating that meal?
Nobody's happy to eat costs. But what they're doing is they're saying to their staff, let's cut on things we don't need. Let's use AI to enhance our productivity. Let's find the middle ground, maybe pass off a small percentage of cost to consumers, but let's wait and see what the end game is. Because the administration, not just Trump, the whole administration is signaling that's what they're doing.
Big picture question is like, do people think that they're going to be better off on the other side whenever or however the other side looks?
Well, the market's telling you that. I mean, it's, the thing is, people say one thing, but what matters is what they do with their dollars, how they invest it, whether you're a small business or whether you're a large one. Every day, by the millions of decisions every day, that entrepreneur, that CEO, that CFO is making a decision and voting with their dollars. And right now, they're voting for a very good outcome in the next 2 years. That may sound counterintuitive, but that's what I watch. That's how I make money, investing in the right direction where the capital flows are going. And I like what I see. I don't like volatility. Nobody does. And I don't listen to the political rhetoric. I mean, I go to as many functions as I can in Washington to hear, directly from lawmakers. And I'm very honored to be able to talk to them as much as I do. Both sides, by the way, red and blue. And I'm feeling pretty good right now.
How was your relationship with the president? What's that like right now? How often do you talk to him?
I don't talk to him that often, but he knows who I am. And, I talk more to the people making his policy for him. because that's what I care about.
What's been the priority with this administration in the times that you've been able to speak with either the president or those close to him?
I believe this administration is focused on the right things. They're focused on policy that unleashes the power of the economy that creates jobs. And you look at the output, the policy, it's the signal right now is keep the economy strong, keep job creation to the extent that we can keep everybody employed, so low unemployment, keep inflation low. By the way, every president bashes the Fed. That's like a sport. It's been going on for
Well, this president has taken some unprecedented action when it comes to the Fed, but
Well, he's a very flamboyant. I mean, it's the way he does
you're
things.
speechless.
Well, he just does things a different way, and he is totally unabashed about the camera watching. That's different, but I think somewhere along the line he got hip to the power of social media. His policy is first indicated on social media. About 90 days later, it's written into law. Watch for the signal on social media, see how much traction it gets with policymakers, and boom, either it's an executive order or it's new policy on permits or whatever it is. He gives you plenty of time to understand the direction he's going. It's not like he springs it on you tomorrow morning.
Speaking of social media, TikTok, big deal? How big of a deal?
It's a huge deal. It's an incredible deal. I mean, I have to admit something because I've been so close to this deal for such a long time. I'm really impressed with the price. When we were trying to syndicate a deal that we thought would be a forced closure by the end of January this year, we were thinking, give or take 20 billion. 14's outstanding. Trump convinced Xi to come into the circle of friendship in U.S. trade negotiations. That was brilliant. Now Xi's a seller, and there's lots of buyers. And the only thing we know for sure is Oracle's on the cap table, and we'll see who else ends up there. But there's one big hammer on this deal that everybody knows about, and certainly the China hawks know about it. The penalty written into American law, bipartisan law, upheld 9-0 by the Supreme Court. The penalty is $5,000 per day on every account that's offside if this law is not abided by the American owners. So that's about $850 billion. There's a big hammer. There's never been a deal like this.
Can you explain for the everyday person who isn't in the nitty-gritty of this what exactly that means, that specific law that you're talking about?
Years ago, when concerns arose about TikTok's propaganda machine element to it, controlled by Chinese algorithms, over a 2-year period, a law was created, a bipartisan law passed by Congress, specifically to force the sale of TikTok out of ByteDance, the Chinese company that's controlled by Xi through a golden share, to American ownership. And the company resisted it, as you can see why they would, and they own it. They don't want to sell it. And they challenged it right up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court looked at it and said, no, we are upholding this law 9-0. You have to execute a sale to an American entity. You can still own 20% as a foreign entity. That's the laws we have for media, but 80% has to be owned. And the law got pretty specific about the use of that algorithm. It has to be under the control of American ownership. And that is the task that Oracle has taken on to provide the security. And they've issued that in the statement from the executive order.
Do you trust that this is going to be implemented in such a way that you're comfortable with that app on your phone?
Yes, I do. Because I'm a software guy. I came out of this space. What's going on here is a very simple technology, a very simple concept called forking the code, where you get a copy of the code. It's about 5 billion lines of code. It's huge. It's already on Oracle servers. And then your job is to strip out the spyware, because you have to guarantee the oversight committee, whoever decides is going to be on it, probably some of the China hawks on the China committee, that you've done exactly that. And you're highly incentivized to do it. Number one, the penalties stick, 850 billion, but a much bigger incentive. It's good for business. If I could guarantee you and give you confidence, and I told you that this version of TikTok is safe for your children and for you, and you downloaded it, what percentage increase would we get? Right now, we're stalled out at 172 million users. The rest of the people in America won't use it for the reasons you just detailed. They're concerned that it's spyware. But if you took that concern away, would the audience increase 20%, 30%? That would be phenomenal for the business. That's what it's going to take. Ambassadors to go out there and explain how the code was modified. And then, of course, if you could make the TikTokers themselves owners of their own platform, that makes it even stickier. So I'm very excited about that too. I'm a big believer that this deal is going to happen. I think Vance is going to be right. And I know that his office had a lot to do with all the workings of this and getting it done. It was very hard, very complicated, really complicated, because you're dealing with multiple members of the administration. Everybody was involved in this, and getting the Chinese to finally say, we'll do it because it's important for us to stay in the circle of friendship in American trade.
Well, I will hope to check in with you again and see what your outlook is in the coming months and years. Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Really enjoyed it. Take care.
This has been The Conversation with Dasha Burns. We'll be back next week. To catch future episodes of The Conversation, make sure you click that subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.